Welcome back to Interview At, where we teach you how to use the Amazon leadership principles to land your dream job. And as I do every week, I have my office hour videos where I take questions that I get from the comments. If you have questions you want to ask me specifically, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. But also from the feedback sessions with candidates who come through Interview At. If you'd like to sign up for a free interview, go ahead and do so at interviewyat.com. There's also additional information up there for more resources that I made available in the last month. I was working hard over the break to get new content out for folks who want to get an expanded set of resources available to them. So that's all available at interviewyat.com. And one of the questions I got in one of my most recent feedback sessions was, well, how should I think about evaluating this new role? Right? This is a person who is at we'll call it a big tech company, in a pretty nice role, but they were fairly recently out of grad school, we'll say, kind of being vague, and they were evaluating the opportunity to move to a new also big tech role. And while this answer isn't necessarily specific to big tech, I just highlight that to kind of give a sense of they were moving from a job at a very desirable company to another job at a desirable company. This is the framework that I have used in my career. I've kind of cobbled it together through mentors and folks that I've worked with in the different companies I've been at, just listening to smart people, how they think about this, and how I have then advised people to think about how do you evaluate kind of the next role, right? And so the very first thing to look at is what is your total experience and what is your time in the current role, right? Because if you've had a lot of experience outside of, call it post school, right? You kind of had a solid working career. The longer your tenure of just working in general, the more the opportunity to continue growing. So when you have a very short amount of time going to the next role, you haven't established a base. You don't have a bunch of best practices. You don't have that kind of nut to build on, and so jumping to that next role might actually hurt you more than you think. But when you've got a lot of experience across maybe one company or multiple companies, you have a broader and more diverse work set. Kind of jump into that next role allows you just to grow that much more because you can pattern match against what has worked for you in the past, and how well or successful you'll be in that new company. Whereas if you've got just a small number of experiences, it's a little bit harder to kind of make that jump when it's purely for, I just want a new role. Well, how much are you going to get out of it, right? How much did you get out of the role you're in versus how much do you think you're going to get out of the new role, right? That's kind of part of it. Another thing that I kind of ask people who ask me this question, how should I take this new role on it, right? I always ask this one question. Are you running from something or are you running to something, right? It's a very important question, a little bit of nuance. And the running from something means, oh, I hate my job, I hate my boss, I hate whatever. It's always, I don't like where I'm at and I need something new, versus I'm running to something. Oh, this great opportunity presents itself. Oh, it's a huge role. I'm super scared. I'm not even sure I can do it, right? That is, I'm going to something that I'm really excited about versus I'm really unhappy with my current situation. I need to get away from there. When you're running away from something, it's more than likely you're going to make a bad decision and you're going to go to a new role that doesn't really solve any of the problems or doesn't specifically address the things that were problems that you can fix by being mindful of, okay, what did I not like? So what am I actually gonna go look for that I do want, that I can run to, right? So that's another one of those things that I talk about with people. A third thing that I ask and we talk about is one of the ways that I evaluate candidates when I was running teams and hiring for the teams at the companies I was at, Microsoft, Amazon, Oracle, etc. I look at three things, and it's a total nerd physics way to look at it, but I look at acceleration, velocity, and displacement, right? And the really nerdy among you will know that those are all kind of interrelated through derivative functions, but let's avoid the nerd talk. Acceleration is your career accelerating or decelerating, right? Is this person on the upswing or are they kind of in that slow down period? Like, how are they doing, right? That's something you can ask yourself. Am I accelerating through my career and now I'm on to the next thing, or am I decelerating and I need to think about, well, what is this changing role? What is this going to mean for that? Is that going to change the kind of slope of that curve? Velocity. Am I moving quickly in my current role? There's the acceleration is, are things picking up or are they slowing down? Velocity is, okay, how fast is this person moving through their career? And is it really, really high or really low? Have they just kind of stayed at a constant speed, not really done anything? That's another way to think about, is this next role going to improve or degrade that? And then finally, displacement, right? Most often in my career, when I have had discontinuities in my job, which is I changed roles and I went to a new company, it was usually because I was getting a step function in responsibility, right? You can stay at the company you're at and you'll kind of linearly progress. And sometimes you'll get promoted and you'll feel like, oh, I did this, but really it's just kind of, you get more responsibility or a bigger job title with not more pay or even really more kind of levels of seniority. It's kind of like a bigger title. I have seen the most improvement in my progression when I've changed companies, because it's usually a company paying you for who they believe you can be versus the company you're at, which is they've already made a decision on you. And it's really hard sometimes to grow out of that view, that lens on who that company thinks you're going to be or can be, etc. Going to a new company, it's fresh eyes are looking at you. It can lead to a, kind of step function jump in terms of the displacement being where you are in your career, like how far along are you, what title, what level of seniority, do you have a seat at the table for management, leadership team, etc. Right? So that's another way to think about evaluating a new role. And then the final question I ask, and this is always the one I end with, which is, okay, it's not about the next role, okay? That's not the question you need to ask yourself. The real question you need to ask yourself is, okay, I'm where I'm at today, and this new thing is in front of me. Cool. But in an ideal world, not what is my next role, but what is my next role? What do I want that to be? I'm here now, 2 steps down the road. What do I want that to be? Because when you can establish a thing further down the road, right, you now have a path that feels like a path and not a disjointed kind of set of steps going somewhere, right? So an old mentor of mine talks about this, like going to the moon, right? So if you're going to go to the moon, you got to plan a whole mission and kind of look way down the road, and like that's how you get there. And you can make your course corrections along the way because the thing that you're trying to get to is really far away. Versus, well, I'm going to try to get to the moon, but I'm going to launch, and then every 50 seconds, I'm going to adjust my velocity without really looking up, and the moon's there. Oh, wait, the moon's there. And you kind of end up with this really weird path to getting there. You don't have a smooth progression to get there. So the notion of the next job is paint your ideal picture of where you want to be down the road. Does this next job that you're looking at get you further away or closer to that outcome? How does it enhance your ability to get there? Because if it's not going to do those things for you, maybe it's not the right opportunity. And so to use an example from my own personal past, right? When I was looking to leave Microsoft, this is almost 10 years, wow, I'm old. Almost 10 years ago when I was looking to leave Microsoft. And I was presented with the opportunity to go to Amazon. And it was very simple. At the time, leaving Microsoft, I was on the senior executive level. I was, had all the accolades, blah, blah, blah. Microsoft was treating me great. They were treating me great. And if I'd stayed, been great. But I knew that I was looking for, at the time anyways, 10 years ago, my next job was going to be a chief product officer role. That's what I wanted. And so the question I asked myself was, okay, I've been offered this job at Microsoft, and I've been offered this job at Amazon. Now, this job at Amazon on the surface looked like a step backward in terms of role and responsibility. It turned out to be not that, and it exploded into a lot more responsibility, and it was great, but I didn't know that at the time. So I looked at that and said, okay, this is now 2012. 5 more years at Microsoft doing this job, or switch companies, go to Amazon, which at the time, it still is, but obviously at the time it was much more sought after job, I feel, had a bit more cachet to 2012. Go spend 5 years at Amazon doing this thing and running these teams. What's going to look better on my resume? What's going to paint me as a more rounded out candidate when I think about going on to that next thing and looking for the chief product officer role? And so it was that Amazon experience, which ultimately landed me out here in Boulder at the company that we sold to Oracle, but that was on that path to be a chief product officer role. And that was how I made the decision. It was very clear when I looked at it in that lens that staying at Microsoft for another 5 years on top of the time I already had there, 6 years at that point, was not going to, my personal opinion, was not going to get me closer to that chief product officer role, right? Because I hadn't had that merit badge of being super successful in another large tech company, right? And so that's what helped fuel that decision for me. So that's the framework I've used and how I talk to people when they ask me, hey, how do I evaluate a role and how do I think about like what's next for me? And it's try to be pretty straightforward, but it's, hey, how much time do you have in your current role and how much time do you have in your total work experience, and do you have you gotten enough squeeze out of that job to kind of lever that into the next thing that you're gonna not be leaving behind too much on the table that you can learn from where you're at and take that with you? Or, if you're going to go to a new job, but you've got a lot of seniority or a lot of kind of personal equity, you got to consider, are you leaving that behind to go do a new thing because it just seems like a shiny new thing, but now you're going to go be a part of a faceless team that you don't have any personal equity there, and that could be a tougher decision. 2, kind of think about where you are as far as your acceleration, your velocity, and your displacement in your career, and how does this next thing kind of help or hinder that? And then finally, it's not about your next job, but it's about your next job and whether or not that role in front of you is going to get you to that desired path further down in your timeline.